Welcome, everyone. Forgive if you can hear some sirens going by. I do live in New York City, so welcome, welcome. Okay, we're here. It's a Thursday. It is July 9th, 2020. What a day, what a time to be alive. Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Whitestern, and I'm the executive business partner here at Splash. And part of my role includes leading a lot of our internal event programming here, which I love doing because I'm just a firm believer in the power of human connection. Prior to Splash, I worked in event and talent management in the music industry for a number of years before becoming the director of events at a small coding boot camp. And that's really where I became passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just for teams and organizations, but within events specifically. So that brings us here today. I am so excited to spend time with you all and introduce an amazing panel of speakers to talk about how to make your events more diverse, more inclusive. So, a few housekeeping notes before we dive in. This webinar is being recorded and we will make it available as soon as possible after this event. And you are viewing this in On24's audience view, which means everything that you see on the screen is both resizable and minimizable. So play around, get your settings just right, and you're in for a treat today. I encourage you to use the Q&A widget to submit any questions that you have coming up during our discussion today, and we'll be answering all those questions at the end of the presentation. And lastly, if you have any issues hearing us or seeing us at any point today, please don't hesitate to reach out. Use the chat function and let us know. Our amazing producer, Keely, is on standby to help you out, anything you need. Okay, so let's dive right in. I want to introduce our amazing panel of speakers. As I said, they're going to be talking to us today about their experiences with inclusivity in events. So let's introduce them. Tell us who you are, what you do, and fun icebreaker question, what are you reading right now? And we will kick it off first with Christine Lay from Tableau. Welcome, Christine. Wonder if anyone is having trouble hearing you. Just me?
Yep, I was on mute.
There we go. Hi, Christine. Welcome.
Hi. You saw my wave, though.
I did. The wave is perfect.
Yes. Hi, my name is Christine Lay. My role as an employee event manager at Tableau and now Salesforce is to empower our employees to show up as their most authentic selves at work. I do that by creating event experiences that scale globally for our teams worldwide. I'd say my superpower is the ability to curate memorable engagements through a diversity and inclusion lens in order to boost morale. I'm currently reading the 1619 Project, which is an ongoing initiative from New York Times Magazine. It marks the 400th anniversary of the beginning of American slavery and places the consequences of slavery at the center of our national narrative. Happy to be here with these amazing speakers.
Thank you so much, Christine. That's amazing. I haven't read that book, but I'm going to add it to my list. So thank you for sharing. All right. Sochi Ledesma from Catalyst, please introduce yourself and welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I am a director of learning and advisory services at Catalyst, which is a nonprofit that focuses on diversity and inclusion within the workplace. But before that, I actually worked managing events in Europe. And that is my deep passion. And I bring to the table a nuanced understanding of diversity within events, but also from a framework and research perspective of D&I overall. As far as the book that I'm reading right now, I am reading The 4 Agreements, if any of you have heard of this before.
Classic. Classic. My father is always reminding me, go back and read it, go back and read it. He doesn't care that I've read it before. Anyways, that's a good one. Thank you so much, Sochi. Really exciting to hear more from you today. And last but certainly not least, Ali DeCastro, my colleague at Splash. Introduce yourself. Welcome.
Thanks, Camille. Hey, everybody. So I'm Allie DeCastro. I'm a senior product designer at Splash. My day-to-day really consists of designing the UI of our product and also designing the UX of our product. So UI, user interface, UX, user experience. So I'm on the team that kind of handles both. Spend my days advocating for those who use our product. And we just really try to give you the tools to throw really meaningful, awesome events for all of your guests. And in terms of what I'm reading right now, I'm reading a novel by Murakami called Killing Commendatore. And it's a gripping work, kind of fast paced, really exciting, a little bit eerie. It's about an artist who gets offered a really large sum of money to paint some man's portrait, and then all of these mysterious things start happening in his life. So definitely check it out. I'm a really big fan. Thanks for having me.
Ooh, that sounds very interesting. Thank you so much, Allie. All right, well, we've introduced our speakers, so let's dive right in, shall we? So we just finished up Pride Month, and I think I'd like to hear first from Christine. You mentioned that you work on internal programs at Tableau, and by the way, I loved your Splash Hub of events. Can you please tell us a little bit about how you brought Pride to life virtually this year?
Absolutely. With the unpredictable wave of COVID leaving in-person events canceled in its wake, we wanted to ensure the safety of Tableau and Salesforce employees first and foremost. In order to do that, we created the objective of delivering a message of hope by promoting employee participation in virtual events worldwide. To achieve this, we broke down our strategy into two focus areas: conversation and celebration. Our theme, Love is What Unites Us, allowed us to honor the LGBTQ community and their hard-fought progress and legacy of strength, resilience, and leadership against all odds. We wanted to provide a space for employees to connect with allies through discussion and education. Some examples of our virtual programming included a public-facing webinar series called Leading Through Change Pride Edition, where we heard from World Cup and Olympic champion Megan Rapinoe and Grammy-nominated singer, songwriter, and actor Janelle Monáe, who honored the LGBTQ community by talking about societal inequalities relevant today and discussed ways to champion positive social change for all. An amazing quote from Megan Rapinoe alluded to leading with empathy and validating people's experiences without having to experience it for yourself. As far as celebration, we put together a Pride Hub microsite operated by Splash, which served as a one-stop shop for our event details, woohoo, such as a 3-hour Disney sing-along with Disney legend and voice of Jasmine and Mulan, Lea Salonga. Folks were able to self-service RSVP and access the swag store and get news for Pride Month. Communications were sent to encourage employees to join Outforce, which is our LGBTQ community equality group, and receive our weekly Pride newsletter chock full of virtual events. We also held a global swag fundraiser where proceeds were equally split as donations to 4 different nonprofit organizations around the globe. And exclusive to Tableau, we provided every employee the opportunity to support from wherever they may be by offering free Pride swag kits to our LGBTQ community members and allies alike. These kits included this year's Pride t-shirt, a trucker cap, a window flag, and sticker pack. Each box came with instructions on how to celebrate with us and deliver a virtual message of hope by donning their Pride gear and posting on social media using #DataPride. And we also committed sponsorship dollars to the Lesbians Who Tech Pride Summit and promoted employee engagement for the largest LGBTQ technology event in history. Speakers included Stacey Abrams, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Sue Bird, and the cast of The L Word. And finally, the Tableau community members published a myriad of LGBTQ-related visualizations and dashboards on Tableau Public, where they received over 36,000 views over Pride Month.
Christine, my jaw is like on the floor here, and I promise you I have, taken a lot of notes, not just some notes. This is amazing. I can't believe you put all of this together. That must have been such a rewarding experience for you. But, this wasn't a typical Pride Month. We've found ourselves in the midst of a civil rights movement. So I'm really curious, how did you use Pride activities and these kinds of inclusive programming efforts to incorporate the topic into your planned programs this year?
You're absolutely right. This was not a typical Pride Month. And as a company of 55,000 people, we were all invited to take part in important conversations and given the opportunity to listen, learn, and support changes that need to happen as we stand with the Black community. We hosted an all-company equality circle call to recognize and understand that our Black colleagues are exhausted and traumatized from ongoing racial injustices right now. We learned that before we check in with our Black colleagues, to make sure we're not following up with more questions on what's happening, rather that we should take the time to do our own research. And if we choose to reach out, to be sure to lead with empathy. We pledged to donate time, money, and resources to groups such as NAACP empowerment programs, Equal Justice Initiative, and Black Lives Matter, whose mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on Black communities by the state and vigilantes. We're also encouraged to learn and explore by reading books such as How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, White Fragility by Dr. D'Angelo, and The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. One of the most important aspects of showing support is to be an ally. We encouraged employees to reach out to our Black Employee Resources Group and to learn how to get involved. Bold Force, which stands for Black Organization for Leadership and Development, strives to expand and empower the Black community. We want folks to get uncomfortable. We want them to take a stand and participate in personal political activities that drive change. And the best form of support you can be to a Black coworker is to back up words with actions and to double check your intent before reaching out. Additionally, we prioritized education through programming on Juneteenth with special guest Ibram X. Kendi, historian and author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, who discussed the history of Juneteenth and understanding racial equality and how to be an anti-racist. We have so far to go to ensure that all parts of our intersectional community, specifically Black, brown, and trans folks, are protected, uplifted, and affirmed. 51 years ago, Black and brown members of the LGBT community sacrificed and stood their ground to give us the opportunity to just have this discussion today. We encourage our colleagues to constantly question and evaluate our privilege and fight for each other in our cities and workplaces.
Wow. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I don't think I could say that better. And thank you for, being an example, I think, for all of us. This year at Splash, we did host a Pride Week, which was amazing. And we decided to really focus our Pride Week efforts on intersectionality and really highlight stories of Black and brown LGBTQ plus heroes, in my opinion, people like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, who really led the movement for the gay rights movement to be started. They started the Stonewall Inn riot. I mean, these are true pioneers, trailblazers, and we can all learn from them, I think. So I commend you for really incorporating that into your Pride Week program, Pride Month programming this year, I should say. Okay, so we just heard some great examples from Christine on inclusive events and ideas for tons of internal event programming and employee engagement. We're gonna shift gears a little bit. Sochi, I'd love to hear from you about the value of inclusivity in events and some of your recommendations for things that we should be considering right now.
Of course. Thank you, Camille. Let me just jump over. Here we go. So when we talk about inclusion, especially inclusion in the events industry, it is all about bringing your whole self, your unique self, into a community. And that is where the magic happens, when we feel valued for our unique skills and psychologically safe. also share some of our ideas. So I want to ask each of you to please think about an event where you last felt included. Now, what was there and who were you in that moment? For example, for me, when I ask myself this question, I go back to a house party where I was DJing half the time, I was bartending the other part, and the fact that I was able to bring my unique skills and contribute to the environment of the party and feeling accepted and if not celebrated by those attendees, that to me was that feeling of inclusion. So when we talk about inclusion, it's easy to see this in a more personal way, but how can we bring inclusion to business meetings, for example? And especially in today's new normal, we really need to focus on how can we make our virtual events more diverse and inclusive. I have put together a few items that can really push forward the inclusion element of virtual events. So when we talk about event setup, let's look at marketing. So where is your event being posted? Which platforms are you using? And also, who are you partnering with? Crowdsourcing is a favorite of mine. So this is something along the lines of letting participants shape your agenda or also suggest panelists, vote on the time and the length of the event. This is also very important when we talk about East Coast versus West Coast, as our panel knows very well, identifying times that work for everyone, and especially for parents as well, who may not be able to stay after hours. The last point here is diverse representation. And this is across panelists, which is something that we talk about quite a bit, but also audience. And when we say audience, I really want to point out for crowdsourcing, it's important that you make sure that you have a diverse set of audience for your events so that your ideas also come from a diverse set of individuals. But also don't forget having a diverse set of content and authors so that you bring different perspectives to topics that you're discussing in your virtual events. Another area, as I just shared through my story, is the environment or the vibe. And it's important that we set meeting norms. From a business perspective, meeting norms set participation expectations. They also set up a psychologically safe environment and a code of conduct. Something that I always highlight is that in events, especially virtual events, you should lay out a reporting process because sometimes it's hard to jump in. There's limited areas where you can really voice a concern in virtual events. For example, in Zoom, there's the ability to enable participants to message hosts directly, which is a key way of allowing people to report any issues that they may see. Another fun one is video backgrounds. We really should allow for background effects. And what this really brings is equity. A lot of times I have roommates, due to the fact that they're on calls, I may have to run into the bathroom, for example, and take a call from there. And with the video backgrounds, I'm able to still look like I'm in a professional setting and not have biases maybe come up from those on the other end of the call. And this is also very important from an interactive perspective. I don't know if you've been part of any Zoom calls where people have cool backgrounds or aliens in the background. It always makes for a good laugh. Lastly, in this area, we talk about visual and written options of interactivity. So establishing a preferred channel. That means, do you prefer that attendees only write in the chat box or that they also speak up, and making sure that you allow for both options for introverts and extroverts on virtual events. The last section is interactivity, which kind of stems into all the other areas. I really just wanted to highlight a few things that you can quickly adopt on any platform that you're using right now, such as Annotate. So really bringing in the ability for attendees to draw, to provide words, such as text on what they feel X question should be or on a topic. Also breakout rooms. If your platform has the ability to create breakout rooms, we really suggest that you utilize this in order to create a more psychologically safe environment for attendees. something that we see in our events is that sometimes you have your manager on the same call and you may not feel comfortable sharing any ideas or thoughts on something. But when you create a breakout room, you may be able to share those ideas with a different set of individuals. Also, breakout rooms are great for allowing people to finally voice their ideas and feel valued for what they can bring to the table. Lastly, which we will get to see today, is Q&A. So that's really giving the audience an ability to shape the event and to obtain information that they want and to have a chance to be heard.
Amazing. Those are really good points you're bringing up. The virtual experience of attending an event is so different from in-person was for so many of us. And I think a lot of us are still adjusting to this new normal that we find ourselves in. How do I, feel comfortable using my voice in this virtual room where I might not know everyone? I love, the suggestion of breakout rooms. I think that always helps create, just more trust, so you can have a more intimate experience, you can get more real. Those are some great tips and recommendations, Sochi. Thank you. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about some of the challenges that event teams and event marketers are facing now in the virtual space particularly, and what advice or best practices do you have for overcoming some of these roadblocks that you're seeing?
Yes, of course. So when we talk about roadblocks, the two common roadblocks that we see in events are time and budget. So with those two constraints, the question is, how can we bring inclusion into events with these bottlenecks? And what you're seeing on the screen right now is a framework that I created during my thesis. And this is also at the time that I was working in events within Europe. And we were hosting conferences, trade shows. One of the things that I saw was that you really had three kind of key stakeholders in all events. So you had your direct influencers. Those were the individuals either funding the event or those running the company that was hosting the event. Then you had the internal, which is the internal team, the planners, and also the audience members. The external side are our vendors. And when you have those three layers laid out, you really see that there's different profiles, and they each would have different needs when it comes to inclusion. So the recommendation here and what the framework is showing is that once you have those identified, you should trickle in different components of inclusion that they would each most care about. But of course, we have those bottlenecks. So what you do is then narrow down those elements to those that your team can really execute based off of time and also the funding. That would then leave you with the true event design elements that would have inclusion components that are most important to those key stakeholders.
That's a really good point. I think knowing who those key stakeholders is probably step one. I'm wondering if you have any recent examples that you can share that kind of illuminates this point a little bit more.
Yes, of course. So one thing that we've run into is having a diverse set of panelists. Now, of course, we have a great array of panelists, but sometimes due to budget, how much diversity can you really bring in, or how many individuals can you bring to the table? And it's not just so much of diversity based off of race or ethnicity, but also line of thought. So I would love to have someone that comes in with research, someone that is on the ground. And a lot of times we just don't have the budget to have all these panelists. So what we have done in the past is identified, okay, great, our company is hosting this event, so they really care more on the research side. And then we have the internal, which is the audience members. I think they would be interested in getting these two perspectives. And then external would be our vendors, or in this case, our panelists. So who would they best be able to share ideas with? Having that in mind, we then identify the key topics that we want to discuss, and then when to obtain these panelists.
That makes total sense. Okay, I want to, speaking of diverse ways of thinking and diverse thought, events are really the face of your brand, and it's where prospects and customers are coming together. They're continuing to build relationships with the brand, with themselves, and it's really the first place that they start this journey of experiencing your brand is with your event registration page or website. And so I really am hoping we can hear from Allie on, design perspective. How can event planners incorporate inclusivity into their design and how they're thinking about their events?
Yeah, definitely. That was a perfect segue. So she was ending on event design elements. Let's move right into that. That's my specialty. And just so everybody knows, I'm going to be talking specifically about accessibility today, because accessibility really is the cornerstone of successful design. You'll hear me talk a lot to designers because I'm a designer, but please take that with, an understanding that designers are the same as design enthusiasts in this presentation. If you are the person that's making event pages, even if the word designer is not in your title, you are doing design. So this is a presentation that was built for you. So when we're talking about accessibility, there's really two types of accessibility that I'm going to touch on today. There is technical accessibility, which is A11Y, and we'll get into that. Not too much in the weeds, but we'll talk about it because it's really awesome and it's really important. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about interpersonal accessibility. And that's just a term that I use when I'm trying to describe accessibility that's really about the relationships and the interactions between people. So an interaction between people is also the way that your guests are interacting with your event page. The person that your event page represents is your brand. It also represents you as a designer. And then the folks on the other side are your guests. So when it comes to accessibility, we've got accessibility, and then we've got A11Y. So as designers and design enthusiasts, we've been practicing accessibility for years. It's really often the design in a room that says, well, have you considered this perspective? Whose perspective is missing? What if this person doesn't find that valuable? So designers, we're always advocating for our guests, for our users, for the person that's going to be using this thing that we're making. A11Y, however, is a project that's founded by people, developers specifically, who share many of the same beliefs that we as designers have come to consider the foundation of our work. So if you go to the A11Y project, which is a11yproject.com, their entire initiative is built on three pillars, three principles, really. And this is all talking about their code, but they are asking all of their contributors to make sure that code is digestible, up to date, and forgiving. I see those three words and I think about the hundreds of custom event themes that I've made, because fun fact about me, before I was on the product design team at Splash, I was on the creative service team and I was making our customers custom event theme templates. And your event needs to be digestible. You're grouping your information really thoughtfully to make sure that guests can take it in really easily. It's up to date. Every time a new hot agenda item is confirmed, every time you get that speaker that says yes, you're going to the event page and you're updating that agenda. And forgiving. I have to think of, confirmation copy, form questions, all the processes that you as event logistics people, not just designers, you're putting all these things in place to think about, okay, what happens if someone makes a mistake or loses their way, whether that's wayfinding at the actual event or, wayfinding digitally on your actual event page. You're doing this every day. You share a lot of the same beliefs as those who founded the A11Y project. And just so everybody knows, A11Y is a numeronym. So numeronyms are really, really fun. In the case of translating this, A11Y, the first letter is for accessibility is A, the last letter is Y, and then that 1, that's 11. That means there's 11 characters in between. So this is a common thing that folks use, especially in the tech community, so that they can shorten things. So if you see like hashtag A11Y on Twitter, this is what they're talking about. So I want to define this because numeronyms are just really, really fun. Also, accessibility and allyship have so many parallels that are just startling, and A11 looks like ally, and I love that wordplay. But also, non-obvious, undefined abbreviations are exhausting for everyone, and they are definitely not inclusive. So here's a little inspirational poster. I'll give you all a minute to just screenshot that so you can make it your Zoom background for your next meeting. But define your acronyms. Not everybody knows. Don't assume. It just makes everything easier on everyone. So when we're talking about A11Y, we're talking about usability for all. So the project itself aims to make the web usable for everyone, including those living with disabilities, which includes, but of course is not limited to, blind and visually impaired people. So that's about 285 million people. Deaf and hearing impaired, 275 million people. And to put that in perspective, which the Accessibility Project does really well on their website, bottom left corner there, the US population as of 2013 was 275 million. So if you take two US populations and add 10 million to it, that's the number of people worldwide that are living with these types of disabilities. This doesn't even include conditional disabilities like a broken limb, maybe you broke your hand and you can't use your mouse, or not knowing the local language. So A11Y is probably sounding like this really deeply technical thing that you want to just let your development teams handle, and it is. And you're probably wondering why, I as a designer am going on and on about this A11Y thing. The reason really is because when we talk about accessibility and accessibility in design, some of the tips that I'm going to give you today are specifically defined by the A11Y project, but it's also because we as designers play a major role in this. Designers are often the last line of defense as it relates to that interpersonal accessibility that I talked about. And that's because we're taking the efforts of our teammates and we're piecing it together to tell a visual story on our event pages. And a lot of times that visual story we're telling is to people that we've never met before. And we need to build event pages with inclusive practices to make sure that everybody feels included. If you isolate people on the event page, you're not going to get as many registrations. It could be a poor reflection of your brand. So that visual story you're telling, that's a reflection of the company you work for. It's also a reflection of you as a designer. So I'm going to hit you with a how might we. Shout out to all of my design thinkers on the call. How might we improve the technical and interpersonal accessibility of our event pages with the knowledge and tools we have today? So I put together this little cheat sheet for you if you want to take a quick little screenshot. Resources for immediate use. What I recommend doing is going to a11yproject.com. And again, it's deeply technical. Your friend on the dev team is probably going to be really excited that you're reading up on this, but this is just a really great foundation. Seeing what these developers have founded, seeing how open source it is, seeing how they work together, and really just getting acclimated to these efforts. And I will be completely candid here. We are just scratching the surface. I like to think that when it comes to technical accessibility, many of us have just happened upon the iceberg, and our engineering teams are figuring it out on our websites, on our event pages, on everything. So just read it, get acclimated, be able to speak to it if someone brings it up in conversation. The second one is more for designers, material design. So material.io. Material design is kind of like the gold standard of design right now. And they have an entire section related to design moves that are related to accessibility and nod towards the A11Y project. And the things that you see in the next little card there are, a lot of them are mentioned on Material's website. So you can read all about design and accessibility on Material, and that'll be a great gateway to the world of accessibility when it comes to design. And then this is a really fun one, toolness.github.io. So this is created by the same folks who are on the same platform that the A11Y project website is on. So GitHub's like an open source developers environment. It's kind of like the FUBU for developers, for us, by us. You can go there, you can pop your brand colors in, and then you can create accessible color palettes right there using the brand colors that you have today. And then you can take those combinations and you can put them in your event pages. And that basically allows you to create color combinations and color contrasts that are able to be read by people with visual impairments. A lot of folks are colorblind, and you don't really know who's colorblind who might be coming to your event. So rearranging your brand colors in a way that's accessible is a really easy way to just make sure you're accounting for folks who might not be able to see as easily as some of the rest of us. When we get to the technical accessibility tips, again, this is stuff you're probably already thinking about as designers, but you want to do legibly sized text. So 12 at the very, very least, but 16 is usually what accessibility recommends. Clear hierarchy. So if you were on a past webinar of mine, you know this, but basically this is grouping things thoughtfully so that your guests know exactly what to look for. So it's easy to remember if you say this, then this, then this. Go through your event page and make sure that that rhythm is really obvious. And, you know, run it through a few people. Non-designers are like the best people to look over your work to make sure that, you know, it's usable. Breathable line height. So that's the space between lines of text. You can do that within Splash. Just click on your text element, go in the line height little doodad there and increase that value. That creates more space between each line. So you can see here, if these lines were really, really tight, it's kind of difficult to keep your place. So folks with visual impairments and folks without, breathable line height is going to help everybody regardless of, you know, your ability to see. Adequate color contrast, so we talked about that. So hop on into toolness.github.io and that'll help you out with that. And then alt text on images. So, you know, instead of just putting your logo up there, you want to say Splash logo. Folks who are using screen readers, as the screen reader goes through the page, it's going to tell them that that's a logo rather than just saying container. And they're going to say, you know, what the heck is that? Some interpersonal accessibility tips, gender neutral copy. I'm always surprised at how overtly gendered some copy is. Like, hey guys, you know, on your event pages, it's probably best to just leave gender out of it, just include everybody. Thoughtful imagery. So, you know, don't just show Black folks in your stock imagery. Make sure that it's thoughtful. I think, you know, as a Black person myself, the one thing I always see on conference websites is like, stock imagery of all white people, and then there's that one Black person in there, and it was almost like they were checking a box, and I just am immediately turned off, and I'm not going to the event. Experience your work. I cannot stress this enough. Before you send this thing out, go through the registration process yourself. You only catch these errors that might have escaped you, or maybe not even errors, things that maybe weren't as thoughtful. You know, maybe you won't notice the stock imagery as readily as you would if you were actually walking in the guest's shoes. So, you know, submit a test RSVP, receive that email, click on the confirmation, go through the entire experience and experience your work so you can really see how successful it is. And last but not least, advocate for your guests when defending your designs. When you're, you know, putting your event page together, brand is really important. And you do have those folks who are in charge of brand governance, and they want to make sure that everything looks on point and everything looks really on brand. If you're getting a little bit of clapback about the fact that you made your text size 18 instead of 12, and someone's telling you that that looks clunky, you can definitely say, you know, we need to think about folks that can't actually see this that well. We want to make this accessible and we want to make it legible for everybody. So I think something that's really important to mention, and just kind of a reminder to everybody, D&I, diversity and inclusion, is, you know, at large is a marathon, not a sprint. You know, like I said, we've just happened upon the iceberg. So I think figure out what's within your power to do right now, take the next right step, and then resolve to improve continually, and just be kind to yourself. You know, nobody has it all figured out. It's just like being an ally, and be open to changing your mind when you get new information. That's it for me.
Those are all gems. Okay, so I have more questions. I hope we get some questions from the audience too. I also just want to call out that you can submit questions and they're totally anonymous. We won't be sharing your name. So if there's anything that, you know, you want to bring up, this is a safe space and we are all comfortable being uncomfortable, I think. And we're happy to answer any and all questions. But I'll get us kicked off here. So if attendees who are listening in, if they're just on page 1 of this work, day 1, just getting started, how do they start? What should they start to tackle first? How can they get started in making an impact and building a community around inclusivity and diversity? So Christine, I'm going to kick it over to you. We'll do a little round robin.
Sounds good. You know, Tableau and Salesforce are values and data-driven companies, and equality happens to be one of our 4 core values. Since day 1, we believe that businesses can be a powerful platform for social change, and it's our responsibility to further equality for all. We lead with data in everything we do. Data knowledge, data transparency, accountability are important drivers of change that we use with our leaders. We work closely with them in partnership with our employee success and recruiting teams to define a clear plan of action to track our programs and progress from a diversity standpoint. And that allows you to learn where the gaps are. We're also working with our leaders to look at talent through a lens of core competencies, our values, as well as evaluating talent through a lens of culture add versus being a culture fit. We've made commitments to programs such as equal pay for equal work, where we evaluate pay on an ongoing basis to address any gaps among gender and race, and empower our employees with inclusive business practices, such as hiring, leadership, and marketing. We even have an Office of Equality that provides organization-specific data-driven consultation to leadership in collaboration with key stakeholders with actionable recommendations as it pertains to our core value of equality. Most important of all, I'd say, is that we support employee resource groups that are employee-led and organized, surrounded with their common life experiences or backgrounds, along with their allies. At Salesforce, we have 12 equality groups, some of which include Ability Force for employees living with disabilities, Outforce, making up our LGBTQ community, and Bold Force, which expands and empowers our Black community. Each equality group is financially empowered to drive forward initiatives that are important to their community. This can be anything from volunteering time to donating to a nonprofit, hosting a speaker and discussing key issues, or organizing events for members and allies to celebrate and honor a significant moment in time, such as MLK Day or Pride. Each equality group focuses on 4 key areas: philanthropy, which employees are supported to give back to the community through volunteering and employee giving match programs; professional development; community; and bringing allies along.
That's incredible. I'm wondering, Sochi and or Ali, anyone, honestly, how day one, just getting started, just starting to climb the mountain of DE&I in events or in just day-to-day life and work?
Yeah, so I'll jump in and quickly kind of just touch upon a few of the points that Christine, you just shared. By the way, I absolutely loved everything you covered from a D&I perspective. In the corporate world, you touched upon everything that we recommend as a starting point. And one of the things that I do want to share, I think for anyone, whether you're an employee, frontline, manager, director, executive, especially right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, you've seen a lot of companies make great statements about the work that they want to do or are doing and the support that they're giving. But what I really highlight, or what we really want these companies and individuals to do, is to have an introspective look, to look inside the company and see what is it that they're doing. If they're supporting the Black community, what are they doing within the organization to further these unrepresented groups? You know, I'm Latina, and I was part of a Latino ERG where it was in order to advance Latinos into the executive level. However, when we had our meetings, there wasn't really that much being provided to us, as we say, the inside information on how to navigate the corporate world in that organization. So really having an introspective look on what you are doing and what you can do to further diversity and inclusion within your organization. I think when you're talking about the individual contributor, so myself as an employee, what can I do in day one? Is get involved. A lot of times there's things that exist out there that may not be as active. I got involved in an ERG in my current workplace and started revamping some of the things that we did. Also getting your leadership involved, pitching to your leadership ideas of how you can create more inclusive elements within your own team. Like I said, hey, telling your manager, what if we start doing backgrounds in our next team meeting? Or instead of doing the happy hour at 6 p.m., how about we do a happy hour at 3 p.m. every other week to accommodate for those that have to leave early? Things like that.
Cool. Ali, hop in.
Sorry. So I think that, Christine and Sochi both gave some really good insights about what companies can do, and what allies can do. And I want to add to that, some things that have been working well for me as a woman of color during all of this unrest, and all of this necessary unrest, really. I have been breaking down these voices in my head. I would almost call them I always call these voices my lizard brain. But to break down those voices and to silence those voices that tell me I'm only here because someone's looking to check a box, or that tell me I need to speak a certain way and not be myself because it might be deemed unprofessional. And I think the voice that speaks up most often is the one that talks to me after I've just spoken up about something, and it's a few hours later or maybe even a day later, and that voice says, you were kind of a little too Black in that moment. So I think that those voices can be really crippling for Black folks, especially in the workplace, because on top of just doing all of your work, you've then got this little demon that's sort of tapping on your shoulder and distracting you. Everybody knows that task switching kills productivity. Black folks have to task switch all the time. So I think that, you've probably heard this before, and it's really all it's cracked up to be. Meditation and mindfulness does so much. It gives your mind a rest. Your mind is a muscle. And if you are, I actually got this from one of my product design colleagues, the other senior product designer on the Splash design team, Peter. He was telling me that your mind is like a muscle. If you were just constantly lifting weights all day long and never gave yourself a rest, your muscles would get really tired. You'd probably pull a muscle. You'd probably get an injury. Give yourself space to think. Give yourself space to process. Give your mind a rest. And even if it's if you've never done it before and you can't sit still, trust me, I was there with you. Even 1 minute to start just makes all the difference. It teaches you that seizing the power over your mind and the ability to sort of control your thoughts in a really healthy way just does so much to help you navigate all of this uncertainty. And also it helps you manage your energy, because being effective in your life and being effective professionally is really about managing your energy, not managing your time.
Preach. Yes, I agree with all of you, and especially Allie. I think someone touched on it earlier and said this word, but I think just a huge part of creating an inclusive environment where people feel like they belong it requires empathy. And I think that starts with self first, and then you can practice it with others, I believe. I'm kind of curious if any of you have examples or thoughts or opinions about what actual policies and procedures, how we can kind of take some of the things that we're talking about and how do we make them real policies or procedures on our teams, whether it's on a small team level, department level, company wide, within events, beyond events. How do we apply these things? We heard a lot of examples from all of you. I'm just wondering if you felt like there was any stone we've left unturned today. I would want us to cover all of that, before we break today.
Yeah, I'd like to cover a little bit of that. We at Salesforce and Tableau believe that diverse representation can only change when you really put the work in and think about who you promote, develop, and hire. Inclusion is equally important to create a culture where our employees can be their authentic selves, and diversity can't happen without inclusion. And equality is giving everyone the same opportunity to be successful, whereas equity is about giving people fair opportunities, taking into account the different amount of access various groups have on the path to success. And we strive for equality for all, but recognize it'll take equity to get there. And to ensure that everyone has access to opportunities and feels reflected in our company, we're committed to fair, equitable, inclusive business practices. This work must be an intentional effort. Trailhead, which is our free online self-learning platform, offers multiple inclusive practice trainings such as inclusive leadership, marketing, unconscious bias, promotions, the business value of equality, and hiring. For example, we review how job descriptions are written so that they include inclusive language to help ensure we don't lose candidates because of the way they're written. And we also evaluate how we show up in interview loops with diversity represented and how we're tapping into different communities where we know diverse talent exists.
So I would jump in and, okay. God, I was going to say, I love that. Absolutely. When you talked about unconscious bias, there's so many ways that you can go into addressing bias. We say that there's the interpersonal lens of bias, so what the bias that you bring due to your own history, your own experiences. But then there is something very important that a lot of times goes unseen, which is the culture bias, the culture of the company, where there might be biases there. And because you are like a fish in water, after a while, that water becomes transparent. You can't really see those biases. So I think having policies where you can create the space to address them. So we are talking about interviewing. Even the questions that you use when you're interviewing, or the nouns, the adjectives, saying, we need a candidate that is aggressive and can keep up with fast-paced environments. Switching some of those words can a lot of times help neutralize the bias that you may associate with what aggressive may look like, or someone that can handle a fast-paced environment, items like that.
Cool. I love that. I want to give some examples of things we're doing at Splash because they've just been so fun, and also give a little shout out to my girl Camille because you've been doing so much work to organize them. We have two things. So our CEO, Ben, has started a book club, and they're reading White Fragility together and discussing together, and they have a meeting cadence. And even folks who haven't read the book are encouraged to attend and just kind of learn from everybody who is reading and just have a really open, candid discussion. So, I mean, I love books, as you can tell, but I also just think that our top level of leadership making themselves really accessible to have those conversations is something that makes me really, really proud to work at Splash. And then the second thing that we're doing is an event series called Together Apart. And that basically means, we're all distributed right now because of the pandemic, but we're still together and we're still in this together. This is intentionally a safe space to have difficult conversations at work. We have a little bit of programming that we show every week. And, for the first week, we showed like a 6-minute video about equity, equity gaps and wealth gaps between the races. And then we had a short discussion. We're going to be having one upcoming where we just sort of regroup and say, those of you who are in the book club, what's going on? How's it going? Those of you who've attended Together Apart sessions previous to this, what did you learn from that? So we take a little moment to pause and discuss everything. And then, we move on to the next session. So I think that I just want to sort of underline what I was saying at the end of my little slide sequence there. It's that, do just remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's not to say that you should just, lazily stroll along and say, we'll get to it when we get to it. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Like, you should absolutely be active in your DE&I efforts, but just give yourself the space to, do your best, work with what you have now, resolve to continually improve. And, that whole thing about meditation and giving your mind a break, that's helpful for allies. That's helpful for affected people. I think what I see Splash doing right now is really just being okay with us all taking a little break from work to address the fact that we're all, have all these things on our mind. And it just makes it feel like such a safe environment for your employees to have that, to have that resource.
Yeah, totally. And thank you, Allie. So we do actually have a couple questions from the audience, and we have 5 minutes left. So I want to make sure that we get to these questions. The first one is very relevant to kind of what we're talking about. Being remote has made inclusion harder now more than ever, in my opinion. How are we to include a company culture to be inclusive if we're all remote? Is it just virtual events? Christine, Sochi, Ali, I'd love to, and I'm happy to weigh in as well, but Christine, I'll kick it over to you first.
Oh boy. Uh, I think that it doesn't have to be just virtual events. It doesn't have to be an event, but you can have small circles, happy hours, set up groups where you have happy hour with the CEO, touch base, have people opt in to these things that might allow them to connect with people from all levels of the company. We did 16 happy hours just this past month with our CEO and a group of 10 employees per happy hour, so that everybody had a chance to talk and get to know who we are. And so it just allows you to kind of unwind a little bit, and it doesn't always have to be like a super serious business thing. It was just have some fun and kick back and have a drink with your leadership team.
Totally. We do actually something similar at Splash. It was sort of how the book club came to be, but we also have an event series called Coffee with Co-Founders, which we started just to kind of recreate that moment, that experience that you have or used to have when you could just bump into one of our co-founders walking through the hallways of Splash, any one of our offices. So, that's not happening organically anymore. So I think that you're right, Christine. I don't think that everything has to be dressed up as an event, but I think that we do have to think really thoughtfully about how we can create little experiences that aren't a huge lift, that maybe don't require a ton of time or production ahead of time. I think it's really about finding small ways and moments to create human connection while we're all remote. And right now, yes, I guess it does have to be virtual. I mean, who knows? I think a lot of companies are thinking about return to office plans. I know we are going to be remote for, a little bit longer here at Splash. So we're definitely trying to find those opportunities. Sochi, we have 2 minutes left. So I do want to get to the next question, unless Sochi or Ali feels really strongly about speaking to this one. I want to give you time.
No?
I just want to say really quickly, leverage your existing meetings. For the managers in the room, you probably have one-on-one with people. Don't just make it about business as usual. Be like, how you doing? There's a lot going on right now. How you feeling? If you're in a one-on-one and it feels very business as usual, be like, can we use this one-on-one to just talk about what's going on in the world and some ideas that I have that I feel could make our company more inclusive. One thing that one of our product managers used to do that I felt was really fun, at the beginning of every one of these regular meetings, she would say, everybody send an emoji to the chat for how you're feeling right now, just to read the room. So leveraging existing meetings, I think, is a good way too.
That's a really good point, Ali. Okay, so our last question, this person is looking for more information for creating a strategy and or, really getting executive buy-in for more diverse speakers. Any advice there?
Yeah, I'll quickly jump in and just share, as I previously talked about the example, if you showcase how a diverse set of panelists or speakers would benefit the end goal of the event, I think that's an easy way to get the buy-in from leadership.
Yes, end goal. That's what they always want to see. What's the end goal? And to your point, there is so much value in having diverse and inclusive events and, of course, diverse speakers, or a diverse group of speakers, I should say. So, yes. Okay, we're going to wrap it up really quickly, rapid fire. Can each of you please share just one or two, but maybe one because of time, takeaway or action that people can leave this session with and feel really empowered to go apply to their lives and their event programs?
Absolutely. We're at a pivotal point in shaping society as we want to build for ourselves and generations to come. And now is the time to come together as individuals, leaders, and companies to use our platforms for positive change. And we recognize that talking about race and looking at injustice may be uncomfortable, but it's a necessary step towards becoming an active ally who believes equality is a right we're willing to fight for and work towards. And whether it's starting a grassroots employee resource group, putting together a tiger team to look at inclusive hiring practices, or becoming an ally by striking up a conversation with a new colleague, don't be concerned about getting it wrong. Create a call to action by putting together snackable resources for your teams and communicate them out early and often. And to quote our CEO, Mark Benioff, there is no finish line when it comes to equality. There's just still so much work to do.
Very quickly, I would go off of my last comment, which is diverse representation across everything from planning to decision-making, everything.
Yeah, I'll keep it pretty technical because I've talked a lot about the other more soft things. I think definitely go try out that Toolness, the GitHub color. See where your brand colors are at today. You know, take the brand colors you have, pop them in there, see what color palettes you can make. That's a really great exercise. I know, you know, just a moment of radical candor. I was designing something and I picked a color palette, and then I had this moment where I was like, oh, well, I don't want to change it to be accessible because, you know, it doesn't look as cute. That's really not fair. That's not a fair way to think. It made me, it forced me to bend my vision into an accessible form. And then when I had done it, it was just as effective. It was just as impactful of a design after making my colors accessible. So that was a really good introductory exercise to me. So really encourage everybody to check out that resource and see, you know, where your brand colors are at today, just as a start.
Fantastic. Well, we are at time, everyone. I want to just give a huge round of applause, virtual, but there's so much gratitude and thanks to Christine and Sochi and Ali for joining me today and just digging into these really important topics. I hope that all of you got something valuable out of today. As I mentioned before, this is recorded, so you can come back and watch it again if you want to jot down some notes on all the gems that were dropped. I know I will be. And thank you all for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
And thank you, Camille.
Yes, thank you, Camille. Great job.
You're a rock star. Everybody is. Thank you.
See ya, everyone.
See ya.